Welcome to my video on reflections. Okay, before we start reflections, I'm going to show you an applet so you can begin to see what it is a reflection might be. So I'm going to reflect it across the x-axis and notice what happens. The A and the D are now here, the B and the C are down here. So think about what happened to it, and let me show you when it reflects across the y-axis. The B and the A are now here, and the C and the D are now here. So can you think about what happened? Hopefully you said the image flipped. Okay, a reflection is a flip. So let's look at another example here. Okay, now you'll notice I've got letters on both sides of the y-axis. So watch what happens when I flip over the y. The C came across this way, and the B and the A came across this way. And notice, I didn't point this out in the previous, but the B's are the same distance from the y-axis. The A's are the same distance from the y-axis, and the C's are the same distance from the y-axis. Now watch what happens when it flips over the x. The A's are the same distance, the C's are the same distance, and the B's are the same distance. And notice the B flipped from up to down. Went from up to down. Okay, and let's look at one more example here. We have a nice looking penguin here. So I'm going to reflect it over the x. Sorry, the y. I'm going to reflect it over the y. And notice he's flipped. Everything's flipped. Now, I'm going to reflect it over the x, and notice now he's upside down. Okay, so now we've figured out that a reflection is a flip. Let's look at the notes and do some examples. So a reflection is a type of transformation. In a reflection, the reflected image is reflected or flipped across a line known as the line of reflection. In a reflection, each point in its reflected image are an equal distance from the line of reflection. So the other day we talked about translation as a slide. Now I'm looking at the other three to try to figure out which one is a flip. So lion, hippo, or cat. Hopefully you said cat. Notice the cat's tail is pointing to the right, and now it's pointing to the left. Okay, let's look at drawing in lines of reflection. So I'm at the bottom of this page. So the line of reflection is where the mirror would have been placed for the given reflection. For the reflections we study, our line of reflection will either be the x-axis or the y-axis. Write the correct line of reflection to each set of images. So you'll probably want a ruler for this. So if you need to get a ruler, go ahead and pause the video and then turn it back on once you have a ruler. Okay, welcome back. So look at the zebra. If a mirror was here, it'd be right down the center. And, oops, let's try that again. It'd be right down the center. And I drew a vertical line. So think about what axis is the vertical line. And hopefully you were thinking y-axis. So draw the line in and write y-axis. Okay, we have some teddy bears here. So the mirror would be right here. And now I'm drawing a horizontal line. And a horizontal line is what axis? Hopefully you said the x-axis. So at this point, you can go ahead and pause the video and then turn it back on to see if you are correct in the turtle, the butterfly, and the orangutan. Okay, if you pause the video, welcome back. So I'm going to draw in the turtle is a horizontal line, which of course is the x-axis. The butterfly is a vertical line, and that of course is the y-axis. And then lastly here, we have the orangutans, and I'm going to draw a vertical line, and of course a vertical line is the y-axis. Okay, let's look at some examples of reflections and what it looks like after we reflect it over the x or the y-axis. So, onto the, I'm on page 8. Okay, and you'll notice this, when this copied or printed, these got out of line, so just bear with me here. We'll have to fix that up a little bit. Okay, so reflect ABC across the y-axis and label the image A prime, B prime, C prime. Then reflect ABC across the x-axis and label A double prime, B double prime, C double prime. So I'm going to reflect across the y-axis, so I'm going to underline reflect and y-axis, and I'm going to underline what I'm labeling. So what I want you to do is get 2 different colored pens, 2 different colored pencils, highlighter, just something that you can tell the difference, because I'm going to be highlighting the different lines that we're reflecting over. So you can go ahead and pause the video if you need to get some colored pencils. Okay, so y-axis. So I'm going to highlight the y-axis, so that helps me see where I'm reflecting. So let's see, I'm going to use green here. So I'm going to highlight the y-axis. So now I know I'm crossing that line. That's why I highlight it, so I make sure that when I reflect it, I cross that line. And remember what we said earlier, they're an equal distance from that line. So I'm going to start at point A, and I notice that point A is 3 from this line. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to go 3 in the other direction. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to make a dot, and I'm going to call this A prime. And I'm going to write the coordinates down, -3, 1. So come over here and write -3, 1. Okay, now I'm going to put my pencil on B, and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to go 7 in this direction. Make sure you're staying on the same line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And some of you realize you can just look at the line down here. If this is at 7, then this is going to be 7 over here, but in the negative direction. Okay, and this is going to be B prime, and it's going to be -7, 3. And then I need to close these parentheses because the other parentheses move to the other one. Okay, now C. Notice it's 6 away from this line, so I'm going to go 6 in this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to call that C prime. And then I'm going to go over here and write -6, 5, because that's the new coordinates. Take your ruler and connect these points. Okay, and now I just reflected over the y-axis. Okay, now I'm going to go back up here, and now it says reflect ABC across the x-axis and label the image A double prime, B double prime, C double prime. So I'm going to pick a different color. So if you use the pencil for the first one, just use a highlighter or something for the different lines so you can tell the difference. It won't matter after we get past this one because we're only going to be highlighting one line on the other ones. But this one has 2 on the same graph. So that's why. So I'm going to highlight the x-axis, because I'm reflecting over the x. So now I have to make sure I cross this red line when I reflect. So A is 1 away from this line, so I'm going to go 1 away in this direction. And I'm going to call this a double prime because this is the second image on the same graph. So I'm going to call this one 3, -1. And then I'm going to do the same with B. I notice B is 3 away, so I'm going to go 3 in this direction. And I'm going to call it B double prime. And I'm going to write 7, -3 over here. And I'm going to close my parentheses. And then I'm going to find C. And I notice I have to go down 5 to get to there. So I'm going to go down 5 in this direction. And put a point right here on 6, -5. So call it C double prime. And come down here and write 6, -5. Now we're going to connect those points. So grab your ruler and connect them. Now notice when we're flipping, we're not changing the size or the shape, we're just changing the look of it, okay, because it's flipping. Now I want you to come back here and study this first one that flipped over the y-axis. Now study this. 3, 1, now it's -3, 1. Did the x coordinate or the y coordinate change? Hopefully you said the x coordinate because that's the first one. It changed from 3 to -3. Look at B. Changed from 7 to -7. And C changed from 6 to -6. So what can we conclude here? Well, when you flip over the y-axis, what coordinate changed? The x. And what did it change to? Its opposite. Okay, now look at the second one we did in red here. We reflected across the x-axis. Let's look at what coordinate changed. 3, 1, 3, -1. Hopefully you notice the y's changed from 1 to -1, 3 to -3, and 5 to -5. So when we reflected over the x, what coordinate changed? The y's. And what did it change to? Its opposite. So when you reflect over an axis, the opposite coordinate changes. So when you flip over the y, the x coordinate changes. When you flip over the x, the y coordinate changes. So keep that in mind when we do the other ones. Okay, looking at example number 2. So we're going to reflect, underline, JKLM across the x-axis, and we're going to label it J prime, K prime, L prime, M prime. So put your pencil on J. Oh, before we do that, sorry, got ahead of myself here. We need to highlight the axis that we're flipping over. So it says x-axis, so we are going to highlight the x-axis. So at this point, you can just use a pencil, or if you have colored pencils, you can just pick any color pencil. We're only highlighting the x-axis in this problem. So now, when I reflect J, K, L, and M, I've got to cross that line. So I'm going to find J. It takes me 2 to get to that line, so I go 2 in the other direction, and I call that J prime. I come over here and write down the new coordinates. I see it's 2, -2. Find K. I go down 2, so come over to K and call it K prime. And we're going to call that 5, -2. Close your parentheses here because it's lacking. And then go over to L. I'm going to go down 4 to get to the line of reflection, and I'm going to go down 4 in this direction. And we're going to call that L prime. I'm going to come over here and write 5, -4. And then M, I'm going to go down 5 to the line and down 5 in this direction. And I'm going to call it M prime. And I'm going to come over here and write 2, -5. So let's reflect on what we just did here. So we flipped over the x-axis. Now study the coordinates. And you notice 2, 2 became 2, negative 2. 2 became negative 2. 4 became negative 4. 5 became negative 5. So I flipped over the x and the y's changed to its opposite. So that's what happens when you reflect over an axis. The opposite letter changes to its opposite. Okay, moving along to number 3. We're going to reflect across the y-axis. So grab your colored pencil or something that you can highlight the line. And I'm going to highlight the y-axis. All right, so underline reflect and underline y-axis and underline A prime, B prime, D prime, C prime. I'm not sure what happened to the order here. All right, so we're crossing the y-axis. So we're going to start at point A, and I'm going to notice that it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a dot, and we're going to call it A prime. And it's 4, 5. Okay, B prime. So we'll notice that if that was 4, this must be 5 because it's one more. So we're going to go 5 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And B prime lands right there. So that is 5, 3. And C is 3 away from this line. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to write down 3, 3. And then D is 4 away. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to call that 4, 1. Now notice in a reflection, the numbers are staying similar. So if you get one that's not similar to the original, then you reflected something incorrectly. Okay, that will happen when you flip over an x-axis or a y-axis. They're going to stay similar. Later in math, you'll learn how to flip over a line or a point, and in that case, it won't end up the same. Okay, so notice I'm labeling and I'm writing down my new coordinates. Okay, so it's always important when you graph and reflect something that you label the coordinates. And also if it tells you to list the coordinates, then we list the coordinates as well. So pay attention to that when you do your classworks and homeworks. Okay, moving on to example number 4. It says, reflect MNO across the x-axis, label the image M prime, N prime, O prime. Okay, so we're going to underline reflect, x-axis, and M prime, N prime, O prime. And then we are going to grab our colored pencil. We're going to highlight the x-axis. Or if you only have a pencil, just shade the x-axis. Okay, now we have to make sure we cross that line. So we're going to start at M, since that's my first letter up here. And we're going to say 1, 2. So 1, 2. We're going to call this M prime. And then we're going to find, well, before we do that, we're going to come over here and write negative 7, 2. And then we're going to find N, and we notice it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. N prime. And we're going to write down the new coordinates, which are negative 7, 5. And then O, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to call this O prime, and we're going to write down negative 2, 5. Now we're going to connect the points. And now we've just reflected across the x-axis. Now, let's look at this again. We reflected over the x-axis. When we study these points, what's different? -7, -2, -7, 2. -7, -5, -7, 5. -2, -5, -2, 5. What did you notice was different, the x or the y coordinates? Hopefully you noticed the y coordinates all became its opposite. They were all negative, now they're all positive. So we reflected over the x, the y coordinate changed to its opposite. So I want you to remember that when we look at the bottom. So what you can do is pause the video and see if you can determine the line of reflection for each transformation, either x-axis or y-axis, and think about what is different. Okay, welcome back if you paused the video, and let's see how you did. Okay, this one, I'm going to circle the difference. So if you didn't circle the difference when you did that, you might want to. So the x's changed, so that means it reflected over the y-axis. Okay, D, the y's became opposites, so that means it reflected over the x-axis. Once again, the y's changed, so it flipped over the x-axis. Once again, the y's changed, and it flipped over the x-axis. Okay, are we ever going to get another one that's different? Here we go. The 3's changed, and that's the x, so it flipped over the y-axis. So to recap what we did, we talked about reflections today, which is a flip, and we learned how to flip over the x and y-axis. Now, what coordinate changed when we flipped over the x? Good, the y coordinate. And what coordinate changed when we flipped over the y-axis? Good, the x coordinates. Okay, that concludes our notes on reflections. I hope you have a great day.